Today we're going to cover a subject that a lot of folks like to ask me, and I saw this on a long range hunting forum, I don't know, 2 days ago, and somebody asked a question, so let me give you my spiel on this. Where does long range begin? And honestly, in my opinion, when you have to dial out secondary and earth-based effects, which is your temperature, your pressure, humidity, and then of course you've got your earth-based effects, which is your vertical Eotovus and your Coriolis. So the reality is about 625 yards, and I'll kind of show you this. So you can see we're at 625 yards at 14 and a half minutes. Let's change the temperature to say 20 degrees, and you can see we're now at 14 and 0.87. So again, at 60 degrees, 14 and a half. So we can dial that out. It's a quarter minute. Let's do 300 yards. 300 yards, we're at 60 degrees at 4.22. Let's go 20 degrees, and you can see 4.28. You can't dial it out, so it doesn't really matter. All right, so let's put this back to around 60 and leave everything else alone, and let's talk about a couple other things. So now let's talk about pressure. Well, pressure is pretty important. You can see I'm at 29.6 inches of mercury. That's my elevation, basically. So we're using station pressure. The Eagle Ballistics app reads station pressure. Let's say we're hunting at a higher elevation. At 300 yards, we're at 4.22. Let's go 25 inches of mercury. And now we're at 4, so we can almost dial that out. It's still a little bit less than a quarter. Now let's do a 600-yard shot, all right? And 625. And you can see now I'm at 13.74, and let's go back to 29 inches of mercury, and we're at 14. That's a pretty big difference. Station pressure is huge. But again, not until you start getting out further can you really have an issue with station pressure. I would say probably closer to 500 yards. Let's look at 500 yards. So we're at 1010 at 500 yards. Let's go to 25 inches of mercury at 9.71. So still just barely under a quarter minute. So you can kind of see where this is going. All right, so let's put this back at 29 inches of mercury and leave it at 60 degrees. Let's go back to our 300 yards, and let's talk about compass direction for vertical Eotovus. I'm going to set this, I'm going to turn the camera off, and we'll just set this at 0. And that's somebody driving by. And our azimuth, we're going to keep it at 0. So you can see we're at 4.25 minutes of angle. Now let's say that we're shooting 90 degrees. We're at 4.17. So really you couldn't get rid of it. Let's put this back at 0. All right. It's just about a quarter minute or a little bit less, right? So 4.25, let's go back at 90 again. 4.17. You can't even dial it out. All right, so now let's go to 600 yards and do the same scenario, 625. All right, I'm going to put this at 0. We're at 14 and a half. Let's make it a 90-degree shot, so we're shooting east. We're at 14 and 3/4, or 0.34. So almost a quarter minute difference, again, where you can really start to see this being an issue. All right, now let's talk about Coriolis. All right, Coriolis really isn't that big a deal. Under 1,000 yards, you're talking in general 2 inches. So if I go to my device and I go to my details, you'll notice that we've only got 0.73 inches of Coriolis at that range. All right, now let's go 300 yards. And you can see that we've only got 0.15 inches of Coriolis. So yes, at the 625 yards, we could have gotten rid of that quarter minute of Coriolis. So we didn't really have to worry about it. Now, inclination is pretty important. So let's just leave this at 0. So we're shooting north, and let's look at an angle. So at 300 yards, if we're shooting 30 degrees, we're at 3.26 on our dial-ups. And if we're shooting at 0, we're at 4.267. So that is a difference. That's quite a bit difference. So that's why I did not include angle inside of our secondary and earth-based effects. So again, to kind of sum this up, temperature, humidity, pressure for the most part, unless you're making a huge jump to like 19,000 feet above sea level, is really minimal at 300 yards, minimal at 400. At about 600 yards and out, you can start to dial that stuff out, all right? Now, let's say you're going to a negative degrees, yeah, a totally different animal. But yes, if I'm shooting at 80 degrees and now I'm shooting at a negative 10 degrees, of course it's going to matter, and I can show you that. Even at 300 yards, let's say we're at 80 degrees. I'm going to do 90 degrees. This is Alabama. 4.22, and now we're going to change the temperature to a negative 10 degrees, and we're at 4.3. It's still, again, not a lot. But at 600 yards, let's go 625. At the negative 10 degrees, we're at 15.3. And at 90 degrees, we're at 14 and a quarter, or 14.37. So I will stick to what I teach. Really, long range begins at about 625 yards in general, where you have to dial out or take into the effect of earth-based effects, which is Coriolis, vertical Iotovis, which is compass direction, latitude is your Coriolis, and then your secondary effects, which is your temperature, and then your station pressure and your humidity. Again, angle is going to matter at all times. But hopefully this makes sense to you guys. I know it was really fast, but I'm trying to just kind of show you that if I'm shooting under 600 yards, honestly, I really don't care about the secondary effects at this point. Not much, unless it's a huge, huge difference in station pressure. But other than that, I just don't really worry about it. And again, I'm going to let the Eagle Ballistics app take care of all that. All right, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, long range begins at 625. Have a great day.